Welcome to World Bank Group at COP26 in Glasgow. My name is Femi. I am your moderator, your host for the next 1 hour. It is Transport Day. We are talking about climate smart mobility with some of the best transport and finance brains I could find in the pavilions. And I came up aces. Riccardo, Puliti, please introduce yourself to our World Bank Live audience.
Listen, it's very good to be here. Today is Transport Day. It's an important day for the bank, for the world, for everybody. I'm Riccardo Puliti. I'm the Vice President for Infrastructure at the World Bank, appointed only 3 months ago, but I'm just...
You still look optimistic and hopeful. We need that.
I'm going to do it.
Yes, we need you. Sophie Shulman, introduce yourself to the World Bank Live audience.
Shulman, Deputy Chief of Staff at the U.S. Department of Transportation. I have the honor of working for Secretary Pete, and before that I worked for the state of Colorado working on clean transportation and at a private sector electric vehicle charging company.
I'm exhausted just listening to how brilliant you are. The Deputy Prime Minister for Mobility and Public Works in Luxembourg. Deputy Prime Minister, good to have you. Introduce yourself to the World Bank Live audience.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm Francois Bausch, Deputy Prime Minister of Luxembourg. In charge for mobility already for 8 years in my country. It's really a chance and also a challenge to be so long in charge for mobility, and I'm really passionate to discuss with you what will be the future of the mobility in general.
How did you get here today? Did you walk? Did you cycle? How?
I walked around a whole day. But I came with, I must be honest, from Luxembourg to Glasgow, I don't came with the bike.
You would still be cycling. So good to have you, Deputy Prime Minister. Dr. Amani, Abou-Zeid, so lovely to have you. You're in so many of our conversations at the World Bank Group. Introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you very much, Femi. Excited to join this distinguished panel again on a very important topic, that is mobility. I am the African Union Commissioner for Transport, for Energy, and for Digital, and all are related to mobility as well. And re-elected earlier this year. So here I am, a renewed mandate and renewed commitment to the causes for Africa and Africa's development.
Do you feel the energy, Gloria Hutt, who joins us remotely? You have a lot to live up to. Welcome to the conversation. Please introduce yourself to the World Bank Live audience. Gloria, we're going to do it so one more time. Would you unmute yourself this time? And you can keep yourself unmute for the next 55 minutes.
My apologies. I'm Gloria Hutt, the Minister for Transport and Telecommunications of Chile. I am a civil engineer, and I have dedicated my whole career to transport studies.
To have you. All right, just because you're remote, I don't want you to be remote in the conversation. Anytime you want to talk to us, you go ahead. I will see you, bring you into the conversation. All right, so the World Bank Group, the Netherlands, and the World Resource Institute got together on the lead up to COP26 to put together a series of papers. These papers were the Transport Decarbonization Investment Series. If you go on worldbankgroup.org, you'll find them there. The sixth one is out today. It brings together all of the really big ideas, concrete solutions. How do we finance decarbonization of transport? Let's take a look at the video. It sums it up beautifully.
Mobility is a key part of our lives. Every day, we rely on transport to access jobs, education, healthcare, and all the other opportunities we need to achieve our full potential. But transport is also a major contributor to climate change, and already accounts for 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions that are heating the planet. If we don't act quickly, that figure will grow much higher. So how do we keep the world moving while reducing the climate footprint of transport? That is precisely the question that the Transport Decarbonization Investment Series is looking to answer. Produced jointly by the World Bank, the Netherlands, and the World Resources Institute, the new series provides concrete recommendations for boosting investment in greener transport technologies, such as electric vehicles powered by clean electricity and supported by reliable charging infrastructure, high capacity, high quality public transport, better walking and cycling infrastructure, efficient railways and waterways. To make all this happen, we must work with countries to rethink policies across the entire transport sector. This means making sure countries set specific targets for transport as part of their climate commitments, adapting regulations and incentives, prioritising transport projects with the lowest carbon footprint, managing transport demand more effectively to shift from cars and trucks to cleaner modes, and adopting stricter environmental and safety standards for vehicle fleets around the world. By changing the way we move, we can lower global emissions and create a better future for people and the planet. So join us to act and invest towards better transport.
Hashtag Climate Action, WBG, is your entry to the conversation. You know, the little chat box there on World Bank Live. I know you use it all of the time. Be part of this conversation. Your comments, your questions, I will put them to the panelists. They're right here. Gloria is remote, but she's right in the conversation as well. And you can be in the conversation as well. Riccardo, looking at that video, there were a number of investment opportunities right there, ones that we could see, low-hanging fruit. Which ones did you like?
Well, I like all of them. I have to say the only way to solve the issue of transport, to make sure that transport infrastructure is accessible to everybody, is inclusive, is clean, I think we have to see at all the solutions. It can only be an integrated approach of all the solutions that will bring us to what we want. It is maybe a low-hanging fruit. I'm not sure whether it is very well ring-fenced, because there is a lot of work to do in order to go there, but certainly we are ready to do it. And I acknowledge every country is different. There will have to be a lot of cooperation among countries in regions and all the rest, but I think we have the capability and we have the determination to get there.
Amani, I'm thinking you're sitting there and often you have the weight of an entire continent, or the potential of an entire continent, which is a much better way to see it. Every country is different, so I'm not going to say, let me ask you about Africa, but I'm going to ask you about certain developing countries where they leapfrog over the technology, leapfrog over some of the issues that other developed countries have had. So when we look at things like transport and mobility, what's the potential?
Potential is huge. I mean, but let me just also say that Africa has 3% of the vehicles in the world, yet we are the most emitting when it comes in, the most polluting. So this means what? I mean, again, in terms of opportunity, this means that there is a vast opportunity in terms of moving this sector from the most polluting into the cleanest. And that's what we're seeing happening in several African countries, by the way, either by substituting the gas to natural gas and giving incentives for the car owners to do that. We're seeing also governments not as fast as we would wish, but moving into, railways or other, trams or other mass transportation methods, which is, again, a root sign. It's happening, not, again, at the scale and maybe the speed we would like, but it is happening. All of this is actually business opportunities. I just came from a session when we were discussing for Africa and the Middle East green bonds by Africans who, private sector, who are issuing green bonds. So, and what my message to them is that not only it's a noble cause, no, it is great business. So it is excellent business, and they are seeing the profit and they are seeing the investments as good business, and that's what we should say. Climate action is not just a good rhetoric or a slogan. It is a great business, and this applies to all sectors, particularly to that one that is, transport, and especially for Africa.
Sophie is nodding her head. Articulate that enthusiastic nod, Sophie. Go for it.
Well, I think what really hit home for me there is in the U.S. transportation is the largest emitting sector, and so we very much view this as a huge opportunity to reduce emissions from the transportation sector. And we are so thrilled to be here this week. One, that the U.S. is back. I think that's really critical, and we're so excited about that. But also that the U.S. Congress just passed a huge new infrastructure package that we're so excited to get to work on, and it really highlights, I think, some of the things that we saw in that video: charging infrastructure, active transportation, walking, biking, making sure that that's safe and convenient. It's the largest investment in public transit in American history. So, this for us is going to be revolutionary and an amazing investment that I think is going to set us up to help solve this problem from the transportation angle.
Who do you look for inspiration? What region, what country do you look at and say, I wish we had public transport like that? Who do you covet?
Yeah, well, I mean, being here in Europe is certainly just a great example of, public transit needs to be reliable, convenient, accessible option. Otherwise, people aren't going to choose it. And so that for us, I think, is the model that we're looking at: is how do we make this as easy a choice as it can be? And again, that can be walking, it can be biking, it can be transit, but it needs to be able to get you to your job, to your recreational activities. It needs to get you everywhere, and then it's an easy decision.
Gloria, I want to bring you into this conversation, just thinking about Chile and some of the ambitious plans that you have. Can you share them, or are they top secret?
No, they are not. First, I have to say that I share completely all the objectives that were described in the video. Our plan is very similar to the ones that were presented there. The other thing is that this is one of the few occasions where being less developed is an advantage, because our motorization rates are lower than in the developed world. So we still have lots of people traveling in public transport. And our focus is to invest more in public transport facilities, in reconverting the vehicles. We are advancing very fast in electromobility in cities. We are allocating subsidies to change vehicles and to increase the electric fleet in the whole country for buses. The focus is to concentrate the trips in mass modes. So our strategy includes, for example, $5,000 million in railway investment in 5 years, and also in underground. There are projects in progress. And as I said, we are very close to have 2,000 electric buses in operation here in Santiago, the capital city, and also developing electric corridors in the regions. So there are many areas where we are working simultaneously. Also implementing bus corridors. We need to invest in that and in interchange stations, because we have to integrate modes to facilitate the use. Together with that, we also raised the quality of public transport to make it more attractive than cars. So now all the electric buses also have free Wi-Fi and USB chargers and air conditioning and heating. So increasing the quality is also part of the strategy.
Gloria, where would you take us if we did a little field trip and I brought the panelists to Chile? Where would you take us to show us what you're doing with public transport in Chile? What journey would you take us on?
Yeah, I would invite the group to visit one of the major bus depots, which is operating in Santiago with electric buses, where one of the main fossil fuel companies that used to cover most of the market in Chile with conventional fuel financed this electric buses terminal. And the standard is very high, is now a supplier of electricity. So it's a major change. We have made changes in some business models.
Welcome back. We just discovered the intersection between transport, climate, and energy. We had a power outage in the MDB pavilion here at COP26. Yes, we are demonstrating the challenges that we have in the future. So the last time you saw us, you heard Gloria talking about some of the things she's very proud about in terms of strategies and transport developing in Chile. But we hadn't heard from you, Deputy Prime Minister, and I know that your passion is moving people around rather than moving vehicles. People are getting used to that idea about vehicles not being quite so helpful in terms of carbon emissions. How do you persuade people that vehicles are not in our future?
Yeah, but that's a good question, because we saw in the video that the most important thing that we have to do is invest. But the question that we have to pose ourselves is, where do we invest and why do we invest? So, because normally mobility means that you want to go from A to B, and you have to have a multiple choice of possibilities to go from A to B. So if you do your choice for investments, you must first look what is the demand of mobility for the people. So the humans, the people must be in the center of the discussions. And then it's much easier to discuss about which infrastructure you have to create and where or how you have to invest. And the key is then not being focused on one mode of transport, one vehicle. So you have to really see the whole mobility chain to find the solutions. And that's much more important also when you discuss about climate change. So, because you have now people, they are saying, yeah, let's electrify all the cars and all our problems are solved. That's not the case, because at the end you will be in an electric congestion. So, because it's not only the problematic of climate change, but also efficiency behind the mobility system. So it's really a question about investing in a complete new mobility system that is behind. So combining pedestrians, cycling, train, and also cars at the end, and then electric cars, naturally, it's important. And also you must see where are the low-hanging fruits. The low-hanging fruits, they are, for example, in the pedestrian area or cycling area, because there you have to finance infrastructures. The cost of this infrastructure is very low. So it's really you have to organize a paradigm shift completely different of what we had in the last century when we were discussing about investments in the mobility sector.
But vast, this paradigm shift is taking forever.
No, that's not true. Yeah. I'm coming from a country where the mobility was mainly focused on cars. And when I started 8 years ago, everybody said, oh, this guy is crazy, trying to convince the Luxembourgish population to change the behaviors and to use more, for example, public transport or cycle. Cycling had completely disappeared in my country. Nearly no cycling culture anymore for the daily use of bicycles, for example. And when I see what we did in the last 8 years, in the number of time of 8 years, in a country like Luxembourg, where people are so much attached on the individual car, it's amazing. So it's a question of the political will that you must have behind.
That's the speed bullet, right? Political will. Ah! All right, let's talk finance, creative finance to decarbonize public transport. Riccardo, you start.
Listen, finance is it's just a tool, nothing more than that. Let's be honest on that. So the important thing is to create the conditions in which financial instruments can be deployed in the best possible way and can be deployed for the best use of human beings. Because at the end, the Deputy Prime Minister is absolutely right. It is about the human beings that have to move around, they have to do their business, they have to create wealth, they have to take care of health of all of us and of themselves as well. So I think that it is important to create the rightful legal, political, regulatory environment in which these instruments can be used. I have to say, let's try to think finance as a tool, and let's create the instruments to go there. Having said that, I have to say we will need far more finance, and we will need a lot of private investors. So this is another step forward. We have done it, we can do it by lending to countries, to the public treasury. Let's try to have the private investors to finance this basic and important infrastructure.
Femi, I wanted to come in because, the assumption here is transport means exist. This is not the case that we are having in Africa necessarily. And especially between countries. I mean, our ambition is also to link the continent, to connect the continent, and to give also the possibilities or the chances for things like the African Free Trade Area to work. So without a reliable and affordable transport system, we will not go any far. So I would like to bring this discussion into the developmental side of mobility, not just the climate. I mean, climate is an important aspect, of course, and I started by saying we want this transport to be safe, and by safe it means also climate safe, I mean resilient and safe and not emitting, but also one that caters for the developmental needs of the continent. And that is why we are also trying to shift into a mass transportation, especially railways, within countries and across the continent, and we are putting together at the African Union, the interoperable, policy for an African railway network, a mass transportation in our, growing cities. Africa is the fastest urbanizing continent, to make sure that, the transport that's being or will be used in these future cities, or the current one, is one that is smart, that is clean, that is safe. And safety also is an important aspect. Remember, Africa has the highest rate of mortality on the roads. And I'm happy to also join forces to most of the members of this panel in and beyond, especially Jean-Claude, the special UN envoy on road safety, to advocate for road safety that caters for everybody, for the women, and for the men, for the physically challenged, and for the jogger, for the biker. So we really want to shift from the car mode or the polluting mode into one that is also safe, by also encouraging the manufacturers of cars not to export to Africa vehicles that are not safe, and to stop the use of second-hand cars, which are by nature are polluting and unsafe, whether it's climate or the human beings. They are not safe, and it should be stopped. So it's a multi-pronged approach, but what I wanted to make sure that this panel and beyond, I mean, any discussion, brings mobility into the heart of development, and remind ourselves that without a viable, affordable, and safe transport, there's very little chance for development to really occur.
Yeah, I think just to pile on to that, from the U.S. perspective, we're very focused on making sure that the benefits of clean transportation are not just to wealthy communities, but that those who live in, perhaps the areas that have worse air quality, that are, historically overburdened by pollution, that they're the ones who really benefit from clean transportation, electrification of things like ports and freight movements, and really making sure that everyone gets those benefits and can get to work and do so safely. So really appreciate that.
I think that it is very important that the developed country helps the countries that are under development, that they do not the same errors that we did in Europe or in North America, for the United States, for example. So we must then also help, when we try to help in the investments, for example, then invest directly in the right things. And I'm surely agree with you, not giving them the transport modes that we want to get rid of it, like cars that are completely out. But on the other hand, also, you need private investments, that's clear. But you need mainly, at the moment, public investments. And what the United States decided now this week, it's very important. And it's the same situation. I'm now for 8 years in this European Transport Council. And for 8 years, we are discussing all the time the same problems. But the main problem that we have is the lack of investments of the public sector in these big infrastructures. Roads, railway systems, the infrastructure, not who's running at the end of the day the infrastructure, but the infrastructure itself must be financed mainly by the public sector. Otherwise, it will never be to take place. We did it for the roads infrastructures over decades. We didn't care about, for example, in Europe, in the most of the European countries, the last 20, 30, 40 years, until beginning of the 2000 years, you had nearly no more investments in the infrastructure of the railways. Now we are discussing about replacing short flights by railway flights. Yeah, that's okay, but we don't have the railway infrastructure, the quality that we need to really implement then also these trains. So really, so we must then also change in our investment policy in the public center and saying, the last 30 years we invest 2/3 of our money in the road constructions and maybe 1/3 in the public transport. We must do this in the opposite way. Now invest in the next 10 years, 2/3 in the public transport and 1/3 in the road sector. So it's a question of political priorities that we have to put on the agenda.
It's also a matter of regional cooperation. And I would like to say cooperation within countries, within regions is really paramount. I mean, take the case of Africa that, of course, I'm very much committed to it. We need all these regional road network, railways network. We need the integration of airports with aviation and all the rest. And I have to say, I really believe in regional integration, and I believe in this kind of work that we can do together, north and south, just trying to move as quick as possible towards really integrated technologies that can help all of us. And the role of digital, because I have to say, I think what will help us very much is really digital, how we can digitalize, how we can make transportation energy efficient, available, affordable. That's a lot of work on that.
I love that question, how, because I'm going to come back to that. The how is so critical. Yes, Gloria, go ahead. Yes, please.
I just wanted to make a comment on financing, because there are some innovations that it's important to consider. We subsidize the system, the bus system, and the subsidy has two parts. One goes to cover some of the operational costs, and the other to finance the fleet. If you take that flow and you put it in the financial market as a backup for private investments, then you open the possibility of allocating private funds to make the change to electromobility, for example, much quicker.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I've got a question for you. This is from World Bank Live. This is not a question, but a statement. Okay. Sustainability mobility starts with proper planning and capacity development at agency level. Financing should follow this model as well. Gloria, thoughts? And capacity, that's where sustainable transport starts.
It starts as a commitment of the country, in fact. And that's the approach that we have adopted in our country. There is a long-term strategy for energy and also mobility. So the first thing is that we have a national commitment. And then we have the strategy of focusing on public transport and mass transport and electromobility. That's the main objective at this point. And that means investing in fleet renewal of buses and also in railway and underground. And in parallel, we have all the complementary infrastructure that is necessary. As I said, the interchange stations, for example, very updated bus stops, and also bus corridors. So there is a set of plans that operate all together. And there is now a different institutional structure in the country that allocates more power to the regions. So we are working in a good coordination with the regions to allow them to resolve locally their commitments. I think it's a kind of network of plans and also these main objectives that keep all the plans together. And also very strong commitment of communities.
Just to add something on that, I think planning is so critical, especially with new technologies. So, you know, in the United States, we've made a commitment to build out a network of national charging stations. And I think that, to your point, you know, you have to plan ahead for that, make sure that you're creating this network effect so that consumers feel comfortable that they can purchase an electric vehicle, that they can go anywhere they want to go. And it's really important to start that with something that you can then communicate out and be able to really give confidence.
If I may, because I mean, you early on you asked about leapfrogging, and this is where it comes. I mean, when for Africa, and we have a fantastic opportunity when it comes to planning, because there are so many new roads to be built, so many transportation systems to be put in place. So we are on the design board now. So we have a fantastic chance to leapfrog by adopting the latest technology, as the Honorable Prime Minister from Luxembourg just said. This is where we are trying also as the African Union, you know, to set those policies and those strategies right for the continent and to make them also interoperable, because at the end of the day, we want these systems to work together, not stop with the, you know, the islands of development here and there, rather to have a well interconnected continent. So again, to your point regarding leapfrogging, I think it is a fantastic opportunity for the continent. And this is where I also encourage the finance of regional and transcontinental projects in terms of scale, in terms of benefit. They are fantastic.
Deputy Prime Minister, then Riccardo.
Yeah. I think that planning mobility starts by how do you organize and plan your city. The urbanization that we did in the last 30 years was mainly based on, we separated all the functionalities of the city. So you live here, culture is there, you work, I don't know, 20 kilometers away. So it was organized in a way so that you have to use the car for everything that you are doing in your daily business life. So rethinking the city means really bringing these functionalities again together and really then looking, for example, where I create jobs. The jobs should be created mainly where you have a good train station, a good train connectivity, for example, or a light rail or whatever it is, or a bus system. And so rethinking the city, rethinking the urban areas, rethinking also the rural areas, because they have completely other necessities in the rural areas than in the urban areas. And then on this, you must see how should you organize the mobility in an efficient way. So it's a huge program that you have to really implement in the next year. But you have concrete examples in the world. For example, a city like Copenhagen is for me one of the best examples. What they did, they had the chance to have an architect, urbanist like Jan Gehl, who really helped a lot to create this city. And if you go to Copenhagen today, with a degree of cyclists, 60% of the population in Copenhagen using bicycles to go from A to B. It's amazing.
So, like but it's a good bicycles than people in Copenhagen. So many bicycles. Exactly. Beautiful thing.
You have. It's more dangerous to really have an accident with a bike as a pedestrian as with a car in Copenhagen.
I believe that. Riccardo, go ahead.
Well, listen, I have to say, for me, the basis of planning are basically two: to understand what are the desires of citizens, what they want to do. That's absolutely important. A very good cost-benefit analysis is very important as well. At the end, these are public infrastructures. The public treasury is not infinite, so there is a choice to be made. Where do we invest? Energy, health, education. This is all so important for the human beings. So it is really important to demonstrate what can be done, what is the cost-benefit analysis. Can we do it with the public purse? Can we do it with the private? But certainly, there is one thing. What we must avoid is just not to choose. That would be the worst of the mistakes, just to stay here waiting for I don't know what. And I think that the case of Africa is there. I mean, it's really, we have to invest in Africa, and we have to find a way, even us at the World Bank, to help more on planning and help more in the legal and regulatory framework, de-risk operation, funding with better blended finance. So I have to say better terms and conditions. The case is there, in my opinion.
And you know, Femi, Railways, I mean, we tried so much. I mean, we were having so many projects for railways. And in the past, financiers were not, even multilaterals, we're not interested. Really very happy that finally now the multilaterals and the investors, I mean, are looking again at railways and saying, hey, listen, this is a very viable mode of transportation that we need to encourage and promote and invest in. So it's thanks to all this debate to climate change. So I want to give credit also to events and fora such as the COP26, because it brought also to the fore issues like railways and public transportation.
So panel, World Bank Live audience, I am going to use some of your questions in a speed round. Panel, these are instant reactions to these questions. Gloria, you don't escape either. I love this question. Which technology is more likely to dominate mobility in the future? Electric vehicles, gas-powered vehicles, or something else that we haven't thought about? Gloria, what do you think? Gloria, but we're listening. We're on tenterhooks. What will be that tech?
Sorry, electric vehicles and hydrogen.
All right, okay, Amani, what will it be?
Definitely, yeah.
Say our feet. I think to everyone else's point, walking and biking, I think is a critical part of that
My feet have got a lot of exercise in the last 18 months.
Yeah, I also think it will be in the future a kind of mobility which will not focus on vehicles, but I think in order to get there, I fully agree, it's electric vehicles and hydrogen. That's what will come.
Yes, I agree, electric and hydrogen will play a role, but we must stay technology open, because technology is evolving so quickly at the moment. I would not do a prognostic what is in 20 years.
But again, it's when you said in the future, what is the future? The definition of the framework of the future you're talking about. But yeah.
It's very different, completely different.
Exactly. And that technology, yes, it evolves fast, but also we have to be mindful of the context, and at least in the very near future for the continent in Africa, I think there's lots of potential for gas as well.
Yeah. But maybe electricity is very efficient, that's clear. The question is how you produce the electricity. And that's, is it produced directly in the car by, for example, combined with hydrogen, or is it, do you use it at the grid or wherever? So, but the electricity to organize mobility is the powerful tool that we have.
But I fully agree, and I have to say it shows how difficult it is to finance infrastructures, because basically you are financing something now with the existing technology, and in 10 years the technology may have changed, and you just have a lot of stranded assets. So it's really very, very difficult to work in this sector. It's really like running while launching balls in the air and trying to get them at the same time. So that's a difficulty.
You need to be dexterous. Bashir Mahmoudi is watching World Bank Live. Thank you, Bashir. Bashir wants to know, how do you change a culture of the public transport and the transport that we have right now to decarbonize public transport in the future, leaving the car behind, perhaps? Gloria, quick thoughts on the speed round.
For us, it has a major target to raise the standard of the public transport. New buses have all the facilities that make a very improved trip, with air conditioning, with Wi-Fi, as I said, with good design. So we have to make attractive the use of mass transit and buses, underground, railway. That's the main objective, and also restricting the access to some streets in congested areas and also congested times. So we have to manage the supply. The road space is very limited. We have to make decisions on who will have the priority.
Sophie, thoughts?
Oh, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think it has to be convenient, reliable, and affordable, and that's how people are going to make those choices.
Yeah, affordable, that's a good one. Riccardo?
Well, we have to think about one thing. all countries are different, regions are different. Europe, we have certain issues, which is mainly to create clean ways of transport people around. I agree fundamentally on Africa. We need to put down we need to invest in the infrastructure, in the backbone that will allow the continent to develop very, very quick.
I'm very optimistic about everything what's running on the ground, that we can decarbonize very quickly because the technologies are there. But I'm skeptical about all what's coming in the air.
Such a good point. None of us actually mentioned planes.
Yeah, but I think that humanity will still fly also in 50 years. That's a part of the mobility chain. But at the moment there we have no solutions, a part of synthetic fuels that we can use for the transition period, but really a concrete, exact solution for the aviation industry is not there at the moment. Maybe for smaller aircrafts, they can also run by electricity, but for example, in a transatlantic, I would not suggest you to fly with a transatlantic flight with electricity to the United States.
Runs on solar, and I was in Morocco when I watched and witnessed, the first flight, across the Mediterranean with the solar impulse, and we've seen them. Technology is growing very fast, but to your question, just take the example that we had here in COP26. We all have our transport pass, it's for free. I've been using the train, I've been using public transportation, so give incentives to the people. In Estonia, and I'm sure in many countries, the students in any given city, they are given free transportation, public transportation. There are the green bikes, at the trottinette everywhere now, and we're seeing a proliferation of that even across the continent, Africa, where you can hire a bike, get a bike, from any. So there are solutions. There are solutions and incentives. The incentive is, give people a viable alternative. And stop the rhetoric. Give them the viable, affordable alternative, and not just, the big talk.
Audience, let me just remind you, World Bank Live, climate smart mobility, where to invest. That is our conversation, and that is the question I'm going to ask all of the panelists to wrap up with. Where to invest? Climate smart mobility. Gloria, you kick us off.
Invest in fleet renewal of buses and also trains, and also in public transport infrastructure, no doubt, in corridors, in interchange stations, depot for charging stations for buses, and everything related to raise the level of using public transport. In our opinion, that's the best solution for cities, and we have also to manage the access of cars to congested areas. But investment in public transport.
Didn't even hesitate. DPM.
Invest in a multimodal system where the whole mobility chain can really function together. But I think that the biggest potential that we have at the moment, and that is largely underestimated, is cycling. In Luxembourg, we did an analysis, and we saw that all the people that are using their cars, they are using it by 40% for distances under 5 kilometers. So it's ridiculous. We don't have a car for such distances. So that's a typical distance where you can use your bike. And that's the same everywhere in the world. The bicycle is largely underestimated, and especially also today with the electric bikes that we have no limit anymore. The topography plays no role, all ages can run on the bike, so really cycling is it's a cheap investment. It's a very low investment compared to all the other mobility aspects of the mobility chain, and it's largely underestimated.
That's not even low-hanging fruit. That's picking up off the ground. Yes. That was an easy one. Sophie.
Well, I'm going to say I think it's everything. We have to make every mode of transportation clean. And when I get back to Washington, D.C., and all my coworkers who are already there thinking about how to implement this new legislation, it's really looking at every mode of transportation and how we get to that future.
Amani.
incentives to across the value chain so as to ensure that this is actually happening. And definitely investing in Africa, there's a fantastic opportunity that is out there, whether at the national, regional, or transcontinental level, that is really can bring not only developmental benefits to the continent, but good profits also for the investors.
And Riccardo.
Well, listen, public mass transportation, I have to say, urbanization is more and more relevant, so we have to deal with that. Certainly, we have to invest in modes that do not involve vehicles, and I would like to finish with important transport corridors in certain regions. Africa comes to mind. I have to say the potential of Africa is huge in terms of the people of Africa, in terms of the natural endowment. So I would love to see a lot of trans-African network that link all the countries, really.
It would be amazing. Panel, speaking of amazing, you are. Appreciate all of you, remotely and in the room, at the World Bank Group at COP26. Let me direct you somewhere else online, worldbank.org. There you will find the Transportation Decarbonization Investment Series. Paper number 6 is out today on Transport Day. This was a great conversation. I'm not promising you that the paper will be as excellent and as dynamic as this panel, but you can always watch it again on World Bank Live. Thank you so much for joining us on Transport Day. Take care, everybody. Thanks for your time.